Hi everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Growthclinicc podcast. Our very first guest is Matt, the man behind the brand Foundation Fathers. And in this episode, we spoke about masculinity and the benefits and issues surrounding homeschooling your kids. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this show. So we'll just run by your journey and talk about what has been all about. So can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Matt. I run the Foundation Father account and blog,
Yeah.
and I've got 3 kids. And I really started it partly because as I'm looking at social media and a lot of the other conversations going around, especially around masculinity, there was a few tweets that came through about they were talking about like, hey, did you know there's some masculine men in the Bible? And this was like a
Wow.
huge revelation
Yeah.
to them. And to me, we've lost, at least in the West, we've lost so much of the shared culture of, because it used to be everyone knew the
Yeah.
basic Bible stories and
I
stuff like
agree.
that. That was just a shared knowledge,
Yeah.
but that's been lost. A particular flavor to the conversation
Mm.
that's not necessarily overtly Christian, but one that talks about it in a way and makes it obvious that that's where I'm coming from, to sort of reintroduce that type of thinking.
Yeah. So I'll assume you're a Christian, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm a Christian, so
Yeah. Obviously, I've at least I've noticed from some of your
yeah.
tweets. Yep.
So how
Awesome.
has your journey on Twitter been? I feel like I'm sure the masculinity space is actually thriving, at least from about last year or last 2 years. What was the reception like when you started?
How was my what like?
Your
The
reception, like how did people
oh
take it at first?
oh yeah. So it seemed they've taken it fine. I've stuck a lot to proverbs
Yeah,
and things like that, because a lot of the things people believe and assume are true, it just comes from proverbs anyway. So
truly, truly.
that's
There's a lot
that's
of
a
wisdom in the book of Proverbs.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a low hanging fruit to
exactly.
introduce people
Yeah,
um to get them thinking about it. I do have some more what people would call extreme views, that I've
really.
shared. The bigger differences between man and woman, and how the Bible assumes and talks about those things. And so I've, or with the current cultural zeitgeist of homosexuality and things like that,
Yeah.
um, promiscuity. So I've tried to hit hard on those things as well, to be challenging.
Mm.
So those get some pushback. I think the biggest ones I get pushback on are the divorce tweets that I do.
Yeah.
Um, but that's really most of the time it's been supportive, although I am quick to block people who are just
Yeah.
like, I don't care if people disagree with me, but if they disagree in a stupid way, then I block. So
Yeah, the thing about Twitter is people always disagree. So what's your take on pronouns? You know how everywhere you look these days, there are people who let you know or indicate the particular pronouns to use for them. So what do you think about this development in society?
yeah, it's just the sign of an affluent society that has way too much and is just kicking.
Yeah.
They grew fat and they kick against.
I feel like we have lesser problems today. So we just people are going crazy. There's so much comfort today. So it's like everybody has gone so soft.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and we've rejected certain moral truths, and
Yeah.
so people desire to feel righteous and moral, and so they have to come up with different ways
Yeah,
to
I
do that.
really agree with that. Virtue signaling,
Hmm.
the use of pronouns and those things are like a religion to some people. And if you don't conform to those type of cultures or that way of life, you'll be blacklisted. And it all boils down to religion itself, like how we sometimes we there's a diffusion between good and evil, Christian believers and unbelievers. good and bad, those things, because those things, the division has left, people have left the church gathering. We are now looking for it in other things. Like look at the vaccine mandate now. There's now a division. There has become a division between the vaccinated and unvaccinated.
Yeah.
So I feel like there'll always be a search for a form of religion, a form of us versus them. You get?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the easier to do it, the better. So like, yeah, mask wearing and COVID compliance is a big one. And not that like I don't care if people do that, or if like I've worn the mask, to be considerate for other people if they ask me to, whatever. I don't care. But it's been elevated to this righteousness,
Yeah.
even though it's the easy, like it's nothing. It's just a mask, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's always something that's super easy to do that
Yeah.
makes them feel like they're super righteous.
I agree.
It's never something actually hard,
Mhm. It's
like
true.
changing your heart or not feeling envy, or and so it's always something superficial that they want to hang their righteousness on,
Yeah.
and so that's the real danger.
Yeah,
But
nobody wants to think deep anymore. Everybody just wants to do the surface stuff and feel like, yeah,
yep,
I'm righteous now. I like this tweet let me even like it. Truly thankful for the COVID vaccine. Everyone who was secretly a vindictive little fascist has been exposed. We
right,
should just talk about that.
right. Um, yeah, because lots of people always think that, well, if I was in Germany uh, during the rise of Nazism,
Yeah.
I would have been one of the good guys to speak out against the treatment of the Jews. Or if I lived in the Jim Crow South, I would be against all this segregation and discrimination. I would be one of the righteous few who stood up against all this stuff. But what we're seeing is, well, no, we know exactly how you would have acted because you're acting this way right now
Yeah.
when there's barely any risk involved.
Well, really though,
So
there's barely any risk involved.
it's just nuts.
The world has become so weird.
Mhm.
So I really like going through your page. There's something a thread you did about homeschooling. I'm trying to look for it now. So what do you think? Are your kids homeschooled? Do you,
Oh yes, they are. Yeah, we've homeschooled them for all their lives so far. So we've been doing it
wow,
for about seven years
wow.
total.
How is that?
It's good. There's always challenges, but the benefits outweigh those challenges astronomically.
So I was at the gym some days back and we were talking about, no, I don't think it was the gym, but I had a conversation with someone about how, so I was
Mhm.
saying when I have kids, I'll homeschool my kids, and there was this argument that came up about how the children won't be social and they won't be able to be social, and homeschooling kills their social, what is it called, their
Socialization.
socialization and social interaction. So how do you bypass that? How do you ensure that your kids don't turn
Yeah,
out to be weirdos? And
you're right.
yeah.
That's always the main criticism or fear that people
Mhm.
leverage. So I would always throw it back to them and say, one, um, public school is abnormal socialization. They're in a very limited environment with kids their same age all the time, and they have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And like real life is nothing like that. And so I would I would question the value of socialization from public school for one,
Yeah.
and two, uh, like we have a co-op that we go to almost every week, and we have church we go to at least twice a week, and so they're around people all the time, and they can interact with people of various ages. they have different teachers, they have, so it's not that they're just completely insulated at home. It's
Yeah.
just that there are just different outlets. And sometimes you do have to be a little more intentional, but it's easier than ever these days to do that.
But yeah, speaking of the intentionality, you said, I'm looking at the thread now, I found it. You said boys need to be forged since homeschooling is by definition a domestic environment. It can smother them into permanency and weakness. So how do you bypass that? I know you talked about it in detail in the thread, but would you like to explain to us how you ensure your son is masculine and your daughter is feminine? Because um you won't always have the time to cater to your son because you have work and you have other things to do. You won't always
Right.
be there for them. So how will you ensure that while you're there, like they become their masculine version and your daughter becomes her proper feminine self?
Yeah. So at least here in the United States, homeschooling is a very mother-led,
Yeah.
feminine-led movement for the most part. And it's even with a lot of the companies and curriculum founded, which is a good and bad thing. So a lot of fathers in particular can fall into abdication, and not actually as a conscious choice, but it just happens because if they have a wife who's very zealous and good at what she does, they feel like they can step back. And if you've married the right person, then you would want them to be zealous and hardworking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the danger is that because it is a domestic environment, the boys in particular can start to have friction under the authority of their mother
Mm-hmm.
or be smothered by that feminine environment. And so what I like to stress is that the father has got to be involved in homeschooling at some capacity. So in Ephesians 6, it lays the education of the children as the responsibility of the father primarily. So fathers discipline your children, raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That's directed toward fathers.
Yeah.
Now, they can outsource that. They can give that responsibility. They can have helpers for that, but they cannot abdicate that responsibility. And so they have to be involved at some level. So I think they should at least be teaching one subject at a minimum. Whatever their passion lies, it might be history, it might be a language, it might be poetry, it might be math, something. They need to be teaching at least one subject. And it might be just reading at night, like they're the ones who read at night to the kids. Something directly involved in the education. And they need to show that it's important to them. So when you're asking your kids at the dinner table what they did today and what they learned today, you have to take an interest in that school and their schooling. You have to treat it as important, so they will treat it as important. And for boys in particular, there has to be some outside activities or outlets, especially if they don't have any brothers. So if they don't have any brothers, it's even more critical. They've got to be around other men, other boys. It's not as important if you do have brothers, but they still need to get some outside activity, whether it's some competition, some sports, some volunteer work. Even, if you're helping a friend move, just grab one of your boys and bring him with you, even though the most he could lift might be a shoe. Just take him with you. Just something that will get him out of the house because they're made to go out and conquer and to assert themselves and then to come back home. They're not meant to stay in the home all the time.
Yeah. So what if they start to feel some type of way when all their friends go to schools and they're the only ones being homeschooled?
Yeah, it's one of those things where there are a lot of outlets for that. There's a lot of sports leagues and stuff, and at least in the States, you can still put your kids into the sports leagues at public school
Yeah.
because technically your taxes are still paying for that, and so you have some rights to assert that. But on the other end, once they start getting old enough, if you started to train them and they feel like they're ready, then public school might not be such a bad option, because now public schools is a terrible environment in general, especially here in America. It's a terrible environment to train children, but it is a great mission field.
Yeah.
So if your son is ready, like he has forged his armor, he has proven himself in several ways that he has the tenacity, the courage to stand up against some of the darts the world is throwing at him. Yeah, send him to public school. He'll have some battles to test himself with. He'll probably make some friends in the meantime, and he'll be able to assert some masculinity.
So at what age do you think is right to send them to public school? Because I feel like you can't really homeschool a teenager, because teenagers want to go out to the world and be around their friends, and they'll get tired of being at home. They'll get sick
Right.
of seeing their parents and all of that. So
Yeah. So the high school, around high school age would probably be a good time for boys to start asserting themselves. But there's more and more things now, even with homeschooling, like debate clubs, sports leagues that can meet that need as well. But with girls, there's probably not ever going to be a need for them to ever go to public school, because that is made to just chew them up and spit them out. And they are meant to be in a more domestic environment anyway.
yeah.
And they can, if the mother's involved, they'll be involved with some of the older ladies at church. There'll be plenty of activities that they can do. And so typically it's easier to find those type of get-togethers that women enjoy than it is for men when you're homeschooling. So
Yeah. So how will you balance work and homeschooling your kids? Because there are times you need to not, even if you're working remote, there are sometimes you need to go into the office. And so for the work 9 to 5 hours, how do you think they can actually balance this thing up?
yeah, so you have to be intentional with the scheduling and time. Like, say right after dinner, we're going to spend 30 minutes on this. Or right before bed, we spend an hour reading and talking or whatever. It's just, you got to find the routine that works for you. And really the routine is important, because kids will thrive on the routine. They'll come to expect it, and they'll just order their day around it. And especially for fathers, if it's a good thing that they expect you to sit down and read with them at night before bed, to pray with them, to do whatever, and they just come to expect it and look forward to it. And sometimes there are emergencies, like if something's happening, just like any other emergency, it might be medical or whatever, then sometimes you just got to say, all right, well, I got to go home. I got to take care of this right now.
So in your opinion, what do you think are the benefits of, because I think we've been talking about how to bypass the disadvantages. So what do you think are the benefits of homeschooling your kids? So like we're trying to sell homeschooling to people who don't believe in it. What do you think are the benefits?
A better education, a more tailored education. So instead of them being taught based on the lowest common denominator in their class of 20 to 30 other kids, they're going to be, instead of being taught as if they were the same as the lowest performer in that class, you can tailor it to them however you want. So if they really, really like languages and Latin, you can just spend more time on that. If they're having a little trouble in math, you can slow down and back up if you need to. If they're really good at math, you can speed up. It's really tailored to them, and you can set the expectations more realistically.
Mhm.
And you can really tailor the curriculum and exactly what you give them. And like all my kids read, or the oldest two read beyond their grade level, just because we focused on reading and reading different things, and a variety of sources. But also we're not trying to indoctrinate them with the newfangled nonsense that the current public school seems so intent on talking about. And so the point is, in some sense, protection from certain ideas, because kids are sponges. They will soak up anything. That's what they're made to do. So the intent is some of that. You do want to insulate them from some things, but the intent is not to do it forever. It's so they can forge some armor that's good before they take on that world. And I would say that the other benefit is that it's one thing that gives the household a mission, a collective mission where the husband and wife can really work together. So we've taken out the importance of the household, especially in the West. And that's why the feminist movement has been able to gain so much traction, because we took out all the importance of the household. Like the household is only for your own personal emotional fulfillment and some entertainment. When it used to be, the household was where most productive work of a society was done. And men and women worked, husbands and wives worked together, the kids were involved, everything was there, households had missions. Oftentimes, even if they were like a lawyer or a cobbler or something, they would live above their shop. It was just their work and living were so intertwined, you couldn't really separate them. But since the Industrial Revolution, we sort of took out the main point of the household and then tried to enforce something else on it. And I think giving the household an important mission like that, like educating our children, also, it really puts that center, helps the household have a little more of a center and purpose, which is good for everyone.
It can also help them become more independent, because once they are left alone to actually read and study by themselves, like when you're away, it helps them mature fast, in the sense that they don't have to actually wait for the school curriculum, when they can actually chase their curiosity at that young age. Because I feel like homeschooling encourages children to actually focus on their strengths. And like you said earlier, that there's no general curriculum. The smartest child doesn't have to keep up pace with the least intelligent child. So when you focus on one child's strength, maybe one child loves history, you obviously focus on history or the arts or science and that. So when they can focus on that thing, it helps them a lot in their future to actually focus on their strengths, rather than what the public school does, which is, if you're not good in maths, you're a failure. If you're not good in this top subject, you're a failure, those type of things. So independence, and it helps you chase your personal interests.
Yeah, and there's no arbitrary measurements. So public school can get into the trap of, the point is passing these tests. So all measurements are toward this test. So if kids pass these tests, they are well educated. And so everything is inverted. So, the point of school is so they can pass these tests. Well, no, that's not the point of school. Point of school is to inculcate a love of learning, to become a better individual, to love virtue, to love all these things. And so with homeschooling, you have a lot more freedom with that. And not that you don't have standards or that you don't have any measurements, but that the point of a test isn't to just pass the test. The point is true evaluation. It's like, okay, well, looks like we need to work a little bit more here, but looks like you have no problems here. So let's work on these a little bit more. And the point is, well, let's see, what do we need to do so you can learn this, so that's more enjoyable and things like that, as opposed to a checkbox that just has to be marked off.
So I think our time is up. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope to actually have you in the next episodes. So
Yeah.
Where can my listeners find you?
Yeah, so it's foundationfather.com, and then it's at Foundation Dads on Twitter. Those are the main places I'm at. And it's only that on Twitter because they didn't allow me enough characters to put the full word father, which is lame.
But it's good to have you, man.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for coming to my podcast.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Bye.
Thank you for coming this far. My name is Growthclinicc. Find me on Twitter at Growthclinic. Growthclinic with 2 C's at the end. Or check my website at touchgocoro.com.